Good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are. Welcome to another episode and live discussion on Own Your Yes. I am your host, Valera Wilson, and I am so excited that we get to have weekly conversations with resilient, ambitious women who are giving us their stories of struggle and success on the path that they've traveled so that we can all learn and thrive together. And I'm so delighted that today I have with me Octavia Connor. She is the virtual CFO for Say Yes to Profits. And we're going to talk about the courage to start again after failure. And what a very, very impactful topic, because failure is part of success. And so I'm excited that Octavia is here to share with us her journey to that, to success, and most importantly, the failures and the lessons learned. So thank you again, Octavia, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell us, I did a short intro, but tell us a bit more about what you do and who you are.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I am Octavia Connor. I am a virtual CFO and I am the CEO of Say Yes to Profits. Now, as a virtual CFO, I help consultants and service based entrepreneurs become fiscally responsible so that they have more money, more profits, and pay less taxes. Typically, our clients grow between 30% and 350 over a 12-month period, and they save over 60% on their taxes. We strategically combine all of the accounting stuff, like the bookkeeping, the payroll, all of that, but we combine that with consulting and coaching, and that's what help our clients the most.
I love it when you say pay less taxes. You had me at that part, right? That's, I think, that's a part that everybody would love, especially business owners. My husband's a full time business owner, and I love he complains all the times about the tax bill. So I completely understand and appreciate the value of your services. And I would love for you to just tell us. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, and but you started in corporate, which a lot of us obviously do or are still in corporate. But what was your journey to becoming an entrepreneur? I mean, what challenges presented themselves along the way to entrepreneurship for you?
So, great question. So, I'll start from the beginning. So, I climbed the corporate ladder to become a CFO for a multi-million dollar pharmaceutical company. And at the time, I thought that that was my ultimate career goal, to become the CFO of that pharmaceutical company. But once I ended up achieving the position, I found myself bored because as an accountant in corporate America, you kind of do the same thing over and over and over again. So I found myself bored and I began to pray and seek guidance because I got to the point where I really did not want to be there anymore. And at that same time, my sister was expanding her business and she needed someone to help her with her finances. So I started helping her, not really a job, just more of just I'm helping my sister. But what I didn't realize is that I was being bitten by the entrepreneur bug. So I started to pray and seek guidance, and I was like, God, is this for me? Should this be what I do? Because I was more excited to help her than to go to my full-time job as a CFO. And then eventually I received a yes. Like I received a yes on Sunday and I jumped on that following Monday. And in the beginning, it was great. There were no challenges. Then after a while, things started to change. And I really started to go through a financial struggle. And I started to realize that cash was few and far between. Paying bills was a challenge. Growing my firm was a challenge. Like everything seemed to be a struggle as a full time entrepreneur.
Hmm. Wow, that's what, and that's interesting. You said a couple of things that I like to recap on. You said I was bored. I was more excited to help her and run her business, and that's where the entrepreneurship bug got in. And then when you jumped in, it was not all that you expected. Like you said, cash flow was few and far between, and I think that's probably a reality for a lot of entrepreneurs, is that you get in it, and then you got to figure out how do you keep the money coming in so the doors or virtual doors stay open, or whatever that
Yes.
process is. I mean, when you think about that time span from feeling like, okay, maybe I'm kind of done with my corporate career, to launching and realizing that the cash flow was a challenge, what was that time frame like, and what were some of maybe the emotions that you were experiencing during that time?
So it was about a 12-month time frame because in corporate America, as a CFO, I was making at the time close to six figures. And I thought that I would be making six figures as a entrepreneur in no time. I was under the impression of, well, if I can do this in corporate America and I can help them run a multi-million dollar pharmaceutical company, I'm pretty sure I can do it for myself. So when I left corporate America, I didn't leave with a plan. I received a yes, and literally I gave a 1 week notice, not a 2 week notice, and I left. So in the first 3 to 6 months, everything was good because I still had money. Then the money from which, being that I still had money from corporate America, it at the time put a blind spot on what was really going on in my business because I still had this cash flow from my corporate job. But then when that started to run dry and the savings started to run out, I started to notice that as a full time entrepreneur, you're really not making any money. Like something's going on here. So I
Mm,
would say about a 12-month period.
mm.
And I just realized that things are not quite going as well as they should.
Wow. And it's interesting because one would think, and I think, like you said, we think, okay, I've been on the corporate side, so I can do it just as easily on my own. But to your point, you said, well, it was a blinder,
Mhm.
and sometimes in any situation in our life, sometimes there could be other things that are blinding us to the realities of what we're dealing with or going through at that time. And I mean, for you, you were walking, even as an accountant, right? The blinders were still there. And so I think of this as I think of any woman that might be watching this, is to, really look at what you're doing, and really look at it honestly and assess where you are and what you might need as you're going through whatever changes you have to deal with. But Octavia, as you think about that 12-month period, and then we talked about this on another call that we had, but at what point did you realize you had to call it quits as an entrepreneur the first time? Like, what was leading up to that? What led up to that?
So I never officially quit as an entrepreneur. But what I did do, I shift from a full time entrepreneur to a part time entrepreneur. And then I went back to corporate America full time. Now, what led up to that, if I'm being fully transparent, before I left corporate, I had built a new house from the ground up. I had purchased a truck. And honestly, I just felt like I was living the good life. Well, after some time as an entrepreneur, I was literally about 1 month away from foreclosure. We were 2 months into foreclosure. I was hiding my truck in the garage, and the true eye opener was I had several bank accounts, and one of my bank accounts, I was pretty sure I had money in it. But I went to McDonald's and I tried to buy at the time 3 Happy Meals, and my card got declined, and that was an eye opener for me.
Mm,
And I knew that it wasn't fair to my children to go through this struggling stage and they don't have to if I just do something different.
mm,
So I knew I could get a job as an accountant because I had the education and the years of experience. I went back to corporate America, but I never quit. I never quit entrepreneurship. I just started part time.
mm. That's good. I love that you said I didn't call it quits. I just realized I had to do it part time, and I think that's such an important statement, because so often I think when we start to fail at something, we think we have to quit it altogether. And that may not be the case. It means we have to change our approach and strategy so that we position ourselves for success as we move forward.
Absolutely.
And I love that because that can be the unless I mean I want you to maybe if you don't mind sharing with us what were you feeling in those moments of feeling like, oh my God, like you just mentioned, my cart was declined. I had to now, what was that mindset or what were you feeling at that moment that it sunk in that you did have to back to work?
Honestly, in that moment, I felt like a failure because here I am as an accountant and I'm managing now Chamber of Commerce books. I'm managing $1 million CEOs books, but I'm struggling,
Mm,
right? So, one, I'm an accountant, I'm advising them, I'm managing them, but I'm not doing it myself. So, I felt like a failure. I had sleepless nights. I remember crying on this porch that I wanted so bad for this new house. I mean, it was really horrible, but I knew I wasn't going to quit. And I knew I'm a woman of faith. I knew I received a yes. I knew it. It was clear as day. But I felt like I had did something wrong. Remember, I said that I received a yes on Sunday, and that following Monday, I was a full-time entrepreneur. That was not hindsight is 2020 now. I realize it because that was not how I was supposed to handle that. But to answer your question, I felt like a failure.
wow. I appreciate your honesty and sharing that. And it's so a couple things when you say that, and I'm listening and absorbing and processing and saying it back to as I'm picking up the nuggets. When I think of what you said, one, you said I'm going back to what you said. I didn't call it quits. I had to change my approach.
Mhm.
I couldn't do this full time. I had to do it part time. So one, that says to me that we do again, the failure isn't really in, we don't have to call it quits, we just need to change our approach. But then the other part of it is that you said you felt like a failure because on the outside you were managing other people's money,
Mhm.
but yours wasn't where it should be for your business. And I think that's a telltale for so many of us. Externally we might be looking great, but inside we might be feeling like a failure. So we might present one face to the world, but the reality of what we're dealing with is far from the truth, of what people might think of us. And so I love and I appreciate the fact that you one could be honest about where you were, and then make the right decision for, like you said, your kids and for yourself, so that you can be in a better place. And so as I think of any woman watching this, taking this away to say, being honest is the part where we get to reinvent ourselves and change our approach, but we can't go go forward if we won't be honest. And I love that you said I feel like a failure, but I realized quitting wasn't an option, but it was my moment in time, like my watershed moment, and I got to get back up and just change my approach for
Yes,
me.
you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to make a shift,
Mhm.
and reposition yourself so that you can achieve whatever your goals are.
I love it. You said reposition there. That's the I love that, reposition ourselves. Um, how what when you okay? So you go back into corporate. What mindsets that you have to address while you were taking this time to work your corporate job again and then build your business part time? How did you have to shift your mindset and reposition your mindset to gain the courage to go back into business full time? And just what was that process like before you actually went back into business full time?
So I had to become a CEO. So one of my favorite business books of all times is The E-Myth Revisited.
Hmm.
And I read that book when I returned to corporate America, and I studied that book. And there is a difference, I believe, between an entrepreneur and a CEO. For me, a CEO is someone that develops a strategic plan, and that plan includes action steps, and
Hmm.
they follow through
Mm,
with those action steps, right?
mm,
But then they don't stop there. They track their progress and they continue to make changes along the way.
mm,
So that was the first thing. I had to become a CEO. And I would ask myself all the time, my
mm,
ultimate goal was to build $1 million virtual CFO firm. So I would ask myself, what would the $1 million Octavia do? How would the $1 million Octavia show up in this conversation? How would the $1 million Octavia operate her business every single day? Now, at the time, I wasn't nowhere near $1 million, but I began to ask myself that every day, and I began to operate like I thought the $1 million Octavia would operate. So
mm,
that was the first thing. That led to fixing my money mindset, right? Your money mindset is an overriding attitude about how you feel about money, and it will determine how you make key financial decisions every day in your business. I teach my clients this because it's so important. And a lot of times, things that have happened to us when we were 7 and 14 and growing up,
mm,
dealing with money, it affects us as an adult,
yes,
right? So I had to fix my money mindset. I had to clear my money blocks. And then I had to become fiscally responsible and manage my money like a CEO, like a $1 million CEO.
mm,
And once I started to do that, and I some of the things that I started to do years ago when this occurred, I do it to this day. Like for an example, every Friday I have something called Financial Fridays, where every single Friday I sit down with my money, meaning I look at what we did, what we should have done, where we are versus where we desire to be, and what do we need to do the next several weeks and months to achieve whatever the goals are. So I do that to this day, and I manage my books. So those
mm.
are the things that I did.
I love it. You said I had to become the CEO and ask myself, what would the $1 million Octavia do? I love that. I love that. I love that because what it says to me is that you begin to project where you want it to go, and but you act it accordingly. Some people say fake it till you make it. I don't believe that that's the thing. I think it's faithing it and speaking it until you make it. And
Absolutely.
so I love that you did that, and I think that's such an important thing because and you talk about mindset, and I always ask that question on here because mindset is the key to every single change. And it sounds like you really went back in the labs, Octavia, and said, okay, what did I not do right this last time? What do I need to change? And like you said, a CEO is someone that looks at things continuously and asks themselves, how do they make it better? And I love that you brought up the E-Myth because I love that book. I mean, I read that book probably so, and I just love it. It just made so much sense. Even though obviously I have a corporate job, I just love the process of how to figure out making things better. But it sounds like you just sat down and really one got honest like we talked about, but two really begin to tinker with and change things so that you could then move on better the next time.
Yes.
And I think that's whether you're an entrepreneur or not, sitting down and thinking about how do you get better and asking yourself those tough questions and then speaking over what you want in your space, whether it's another position or you failed at something, speaking life and saying, I'm going to be this way, I'm going to be this thing, I think is so important. I love that you brought that out. Like when I mean, how did the failure though help you approach running a business differently? Well, first of all, the first question I ask is, so you went back into to corporate knowing that it was, for, did you think that it was for a certain period of time? Did you give yourself a certain period of time? What was that runway between going back into corporate and running your business again full time?
Yes, because I knew I didn't want to be in corporate, but I knew I had to. So I gave myself a date and I said, by this date, I will be a full time entrepreneur again. But I didn't just give myself a date. I also stated that my revenue for the company needed to be X amount because I needed it to cover my salary from corporate America plus have money to actually grow and operate the business on a daily basis. So I set the revenue goal or the money goal, as I call it, and then I also set the date. And I basically said, whichever one comes first, that's what I'm going to do. But when I did go back to corporate America, instead of just saving, I saved with a purpose. And
Mm.
the purpose was, one, I needed a cushion for my personal life. And two, I needed to be able to invest in my company and cover my salary once I leave corporate America again. Because I stated to myself, I am not, if God willing, going back to corporate America after this time. This was the lesson. This was the failure. These are the mistakes I've made, and I'm not going to make those mistakes again.
I love it. I love it. You gave yourself a date and
Mm-hmm.
a revenue goal. Like you were putting it on paper, putting it in the atmosphere. I
Yes,
I love you got specific is what I'm hearing. And
yes.
I think that that's the key to every single thing is to get really, really specific. And I'm thinking this through as I'm talking with you because I know that sometimes after failure, we can be afraid to get specific again because we're afraid of the failure of what if I don't reach that goal this time. But I love that you were courageous enough to say, no, I know because you did some analysis. You said, no, I know what I didn't do. So
Mm-hmm.
let me now set this goal with this in mind and work to build this thing differently. Um, when you think about this, how do you think the failure has helped you approach running the business differently and for the better this time around?
So, one of the things was that I always look at my mistakes, or when I'm doing my financial Fridays, or every month, I will sit back and look at what happened in the previous months and I write it down. I have a journal over here, I have several journals over the years. But I always look at what did we do? What did we do good? What did we do bad? And I operate my business that way. I even consult with my clients like that when we're looking at their finances. What happened? If this was the goal and we did not achieve that goal, why? We have to be honest and transparent with ourselves, I feel, in order to achieve that next level of success. So I
Mm.
think for me, that was the ultimate thing. And then I like to reverse engineer everything in my life and in my business. And when I set a goal, like I have a goal for 2021, I sat back before 2021 began and I said, well, if this is the ultimate goal, what do I do in December? What do I do in June? What do I do in March? What do I do in January in order so that when December 31st of 2021 comes, I've achieved that goal?
Mhm. That makes sense. I love it. And me too. I'm always reverse engineering something to figure out what I can do differently or how I can, if that's the goal, then what I need to do today. And I think that's again going back to failure versus success and being strategic on how do you get to success even the second time around. What would you say to any woman right now about um, failure and having the courage to start over again?
Failure is a part of success. If you know that this is your calling, if you know that that is your ultimate goal, no matter how many times you fall or you fail, do not give up. Don't give up on yourself, and learn from your mistakes, learn from your failure because maybe you failed on purpose.
Mm,
And that purpose was to show you things so that you can be better at whatever it is that you're doing. So I would
mm,
say never give up. Maybe you have to adjust. Maybe you have to reposition. Maybe you have to take some time and come back as a new person. I often say, and I have a friend that said this to me too. I will go down so that I can come back up.
mm,
So maybe those are some things that you have to do, but never stop at failure and never look at failure as failure. Just kind of look at it as this is the stage that I'm on. This is the chapter. Now we're going to close that chapter and we're going to start a new chapter because I'm writing the story. So I'm going to start a new chapter.
Wow. I love that. You said maybe you failed on purpose so that you could figure out what to do better the next time. I that is so true and so powerful. Um to really challenge ourselves and say, well, maybe you failed on purpose to build it back better the
Mm-hmm.
next time
Exactly.
around. And like you said, I may go down, but I am going to get up. That
Yeah.
is it, because you're right. It is a part of life. And I talk about that a lot in when I do speaking engagements about you're going to get a no and you're going to get failure. So, how do you adjust to that part of life? And like you said, you're writing a book. So, you get to change the chapter. Like, you know what? All right, that chapter is done. I've got it. Let me write a
Yes.
new one with
Yes.
some more insight and some more intuitiveness and some more clarity. So this next chapter is going to be even better. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm loving it. Those are some powerful gems, Octavia.
Yeah.
I appreciate you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experiences and insight with us today. I know that this is helping some, it's helped me as I'm listening to you, and I know it's helping women who will watch this even later that might be going through different stages, whether it's a business, whether it's their career, whether it's a personal part of their life where they need to rewrite or write another chapter. And
Yes.
so your messages will definitely help them. So thank you again for joining me.
Thank you for having me. This was fun, and I truly hope it helps someone.
Absolutely. And why don't you tell people how they can find you?
You can find me on all social media platforms at Say Yes to Profits. Our website is sayyesToProfits.com. And then you can also find me on Instagram at Octavia Connor with an ER underscore. Octavia Connor underscore.
Perfect. Thank you so much again. And thank you to every woman who and man who might be watching. Um, Stay tuned again next Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern. This is our lunchtime 30-minute break to get some insights and some wisdom as we move forward to success. Thank you again for watching and see you next Thursday.